The universe had long been a stage for power plays, but no species believed they were more destined for dominance than the Vraxis Dominion. They were conquerors by birthright, their empire stretching across hundreds of star systems. For centuries, they had crushed weaker civilizations, assimilating them or erasing them altogether. Now their eyes were set on a new target, Earth. To the Vraxis, humanity was an anomaly. A species that, by all accounts, should have been extinguished in its infancy, yet had thrived against impossible odds. They were small compared to the empires of the galaxy, but their tenacity unnerved the Vraxis Council. Humanity's rapid advancement in technology, their mysterious ability to repel every threat with seemingly minimal effort, and most of all, their refusal to expand beyond their borders infuriated the Dominion. Sitting at the head of the Vraxis Council was Supreme Commander Zalker, a towering figure draped in ceremonial armor, his dark scales gleaming under the council chamber's artificial light. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he delivered the ultimatum. His voice boomed across the interstellar transmission. Earth, your time has come. We offer you one chance: submit to the Dominion and live as our subordinates, or face total annihilation. You have 3 planetary rotations to comply. On the other side of the galaxy, in the human capital of New Geneva, the message was received. General Adrian Garfield, head of the Earth Defense Force, sat stone-faced in a war room filled with senior military leaders and advisors. The room was silent as the Vraxis leader's words echoed through the chamber. There was no panic, only measured contemplation. Garfield finally broke the silence. This isn't the first time someone has tried to intimidate us, she said, almost bored. She turned to her second-in-command, Colonel Mark Beckett, a tactical genius known for his pragmatism. How credible is this threat? Beckett's fingers danced across his tablet, bringing up intelligence reports and star charts. Their fleet is massive, no doubt. They've conquered entire systems, but they've never faced us directly. They're relying on intimidation tactics. I'd say they underestimate us. They always do, Garfield whispered, leaning back in her chair. Her mind raced, considering the possibilities. The Vraxis had sent their message expecting fear, submission. What they failed to understand was that humanity had become something more than the fragile species they believed they were dealing with. Back in the Vraxis capital, Supreme Commander Zalker reclined confidently. By now, they will be trembling, he said to his generals, who nodded in agreement. No species has ever refused the ultimatum. But Zalker was wrong. Humanity did not tremble. Instead, they convened. In the following hours, Earth's leaders gathered virtually from across the planet. Scientists, diplomats, and military officers discussed their options. Some argued for negotiation, while others suggested a show of force to buy more time. Yet through it all, Garfield remained calm, confident. She knew Earth had something the Vraxis could not comprehend, a hidden strength that had never been revealed to the galaxy. As the countdown to the Vraxis deadline loomed closer, humanity's response was prepared. A simple message, delivered back to the Supreme Commander, without any hint of fear or desperation. We do not surrender, was all it said. In the Vraxis council chambers, Zalker's face twisted into a grin of disbelief. Foolish, he muttered. They think they can defy the might of the Dominion? His generals shifted nervously. They had seen this defiance before, but never from a species like humanity. Let them have their pride, Zalker growled, his grin fading into a snarl. We will crush them, and they will learn the price of arrogance. As Zalker's fleet prepared for war, Earth remained silent, waiting. The stage was set, and the Vraxis were too blinded by their arrogance to see the storm they had invited. Supreme Commander Zalker stared at the single line of defiance from Earth with a growing rage. To him, the human response was an insult, a small, unproven species daring to challenge the might of the Vraxis Dominion. He would make them suffer for their insolence. His fleet, the largest the Dominion had ever assembled, was mobilized. Dozens of warships, each capable of obliterating entire cities, gathered at the edges of human space. The initial plan had been to issue the ultimatum and await Earth's surrender. Now, It was clear to Zalker that he would need to make an example of them, not just for humanity's sake but to remind the galaxy of the Vraxis' dominance. They will beg for mercy soon enough, Zalker declared to his generals as the fleet readied itself for the first strikes. Begin the attacks. Let's see how long their arrogance holds. The Vraxis launched their initial assaults on distant human colonies. Small settlements in the Outer Rim, unprepared for such an onslaught, were devastated in a matter of hours. The Vraxis generals were confident this show of force would send Earth into a panic. But they were wrong. In New Geneva, General Adrian Garfield and her team watched the footage of the attacks with grim determination. There was no room for emotional reactions now, only strategy. "They're trying to provoke us," said Colonel Mark Beckett, his eyes scanning the tactical displays showing the Vraxis fleet movements. "They want us to overreact, make a mistake. We won't give them the satisfaction," Garfield responded calmly. "They think by attacking our fringes, they can draw us into a fight on their terms." "What's our next move, General?" an aide asked, tension thick in the room. Garfield stood slowly, her presence commanding the attention of everyone around her. "We continue to observe. Let them waste their resources on colonies. We're not going to engage them until they cross the line." Across the galaxy, the Vraxis continued their attacks, each strike more brutal than the last. They broadcast their victories across the interstellar network, boasting of humanity's impending collapse. To the rest of the galaxy, it seemed as though the humans were simply taking the beating, refusing to fight back. Whispers of human cowardice spread among neutral species. But the Vraxis didn't realize they were being drawn deeper into a trap. Zalker grew impatient. Despite the destruction his forces wrought, Earth itself remained untouched. No retaliation, no plea for surrender, nothing. It was as if humanity didn't care. This infuriated him more than any resistance could have. "They're hiding," Zalker sneered, pacing in his war room. His generals exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to advise their leader. "They won't dare challenge us because they know they would be crushed." But there was a creeping unease among his ranks. The Vraxis had fought countless enemies, and yet something about humanity was different. This was a species that should have crumbled under pressure, yet they remained calm, waiting. In the human command center, Garfield and her team had carefully monitored every Vraxis move. They had seen their colonies fall, but with each attack, humanity gathered more critical data on the Dominion's tactics and weaknesses. Every skirmish was a piece of the puzzle, a step closer to the moment when they would strike back. "We've given them enough rope," Beckett remarked quietly to Garfield, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Soon they'll hang themselves." Garfield nodded. "They don't understand us. They never have. They think we're weak because we haven't fought back. They'll learn soon enough." The Vraxis escalated their attacks further, this time edging closer to Earth's core systems. The arrogance in their broadcasts grew as they mocked humanity's supposed cowardice, claiming victory was inevitable. Zalker, now fully convinced of his superiority, prepared his fleet for the final assault. "We'll hit them where it hurts," he declared, confident that Earth would finally be brought to its knees. But Earth was waiting, calm, unshaken, and ready. Supreme Commander Zalker's fleet hovered just beyond Earth's orbit, a vast armada of warships bristling with weaponry, ready to reduce the planet to rubble. Zalker stood at the helm of his command ship, his sharp eyes scanning the blue-green world below with contempt. "This is their final chance," he growled. "Send one last message. Offer them the mercy of surrender." The transmission was sent. On Earth, in the command center deep within New Geneva, General Adrian Garfield watched the Vraxis message flash on the screen. Zalker's voice was cold, dripping with arrogance. "Earth, we are at your doorstep. Surrender now or face utter annihilation." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of the impending battle pressing down on everyone present. Yet, Garfield remained composed, her steely gaze fixed on the display. "They think they have us cornered," she said quietly, turning to Colonel Mark Beckett. "They don't know what's coming." For centuries, humanity had developed its defenses in secret. A weapon of last resort, one so devastating that it was never meant to be used. A failsafe created to ensure humanity's survival against any force, no matter how powerful. It was known simply as the button. It wasn't a weapon of destruction in the traditional sense, but rather a device capable of delivering a precise, targeted pulse designed to neutralize the biological makeup of any non-human species. Garfield stood over the small, unassuming console in the center of the command room, her finger hovering just above the button. Around her, the room was tense, but there was no fear, only the quiet determination of those who had prepared for this day. "They pushed too far," Beckett said softly, his eyes meeting Garfield's. "It's time." Garfield nodded. "Activate the final protocol," she commanded. Beckett keyed in the sequence, and the room dimmed as a series of lights began flashing on the console. A quiet hum filled the air as the system prepared to unleash its terrifying power. The pulse would be invisible, instantaneous, and undetectable until it was too late. Out in space, Zalker watched as his fleet positioned itself in formation, weapons locked on Earth. He grinned, savoring the moment. Victory was so close he could taste it. "Prepare to fire," he ordered, his generals eagerly awaiting the command. But then, without warning, something shifted. A sudden, inexplicable wave swept through the fleet, unseen and unfelt by the Vrax's sensors. The soldiers on the bridge of Zalker's ship froze, their hands still poised over controls. A strange silence fell over the fleet as the crew stood in place, unmoving. Zalker's eyes widened in confusion. "Report!" he barked, but his voice was met with silence. He turned to his generals, but they too stood motionless, eyes open yet lifeless. Panic flickered in his chest as he tried to move, but his limbs refused to obey. The realization hit him like a blow: something had gone horribly wrong. On Earth, Garfield watched the readings on her display. The pulse had done its job. The Vrax's fleet, once so menacing, now floated aimlessly in space, its crew dead where they stood. There had been no explosion, no destruction, just silence. The button had been pressed, and the war was over before it began. Beckett looked up from his console. "It worked. The entire fleet, neutralized." Garfield exhaled slowly, a weight lifting from her shoulders. "They never saw it coming," she whispered. "Their arrogance blinded them." Far above Earth, the once invincible Vrax's fleet drifted, its ships dark and lifeless. Zalker, still frozen in place, stared helplessly out at the planet that had just defeated him without firing a single shot. His empire's arrogance had cost them everything. On Earth, humanity stood victorious, not through brute force, but through quiet, calculated precision. The button had done its job, and the galaxy would soon learn that Earth was not to be underestimated. The Vrax's fleet, once a symbol of unstoppable power, now hung in space like a graveyard. Ships that had once gleamed with menace drifted aimlessly, their lights extinguished. Every soldier, every commander, frozen in place, lifeless. The pulse had been surgical, precise, leaving the ships intact but eliminating the threat entirely. In the command center of New Geneva, a quiet settled over the room. The battle had ended before it began, just as General Adrian Garfield had predicted. She stood before the large tactical display, watching the aftermath unfold in real time, the Vrax's ships now mere husks. The tension that had filled the room moments ago melted into a stunned silence. "We won," Colonel Mark Beckett said, almost disbelieving. His eyes remained on the screen, where the once mighty armada had been neutralized without a single human casualty. "Just like that." Garfield nodded, her face unreadable. "It was never about brute force," she said quietly. "They didn't understand what we were capable of. They thought this would be a fight. But we didn't need to fight." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "They were already dead the moment they underestimated us." Humanity's victory had been quiet, but the message it sent across the galaxy was deafening. In the distant halls of the Galactic Council, the news of the Vrax's defeat spread like wildfire. This was the same council that had once dismissed humanity as a backwater species, a minor player on the galactic stage. Now they watched in disbelief, trying to comprehend the scale of Earth's silent, overwhelming power. Ambassador Colaris, one of the oldest and most respected members of the council, stood before the gathered representatives. "The Vraxis have fallen," he said, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Their entire fleet, wiped out without a single human loss. Earth did this, Earth, the species we once ignored." Whispers filled the chamber. Some were incredulous, others fearful. The humans had proven themselves capable of ending a war without lifting a weapon, without suffering casualties, and with a single button. It was a feat no other species in the galaxy could claim. Back on Earth, General Garfield had already shifted her focus. There would be no celebrations, no public displays of victory. Humanity's strength lay in its quiet resolve, and the understanding that power was not something to flaunt but to wield when necessary, and only when provoked. "We'll need to address the council soon," Beckett remarked, glancing at Garfield. "They'll want to know how we did it. They'll be looking for answers." Garfield's lips tightened into a thin line. "They'll get nothing from us," she replied, her voice cold. "The less they know about our capabilities, the better. Let them wonder. Let them fear." As Earth returned to its routine, the rest of the galaxy wrestled with a new reality, one where humanity had emerged as a force no one could afford to challenge. The council members, once so dismissive, now scrambled to reassess their relationships with Earth. Some considered alliances, while others, like Ambassador Colaris, cautioned against any further confrontation. In the final moments of the war that never was, the true cost of Vraxis' arrogance became clear. They had relied on intimidation, on a belief that no species could stand against them. But in their hubris, they had overlooked the most dangerous aspect of humanity: its patience, and its readiness to strike when the moment was right. In the quiet of the command center, Garfield looked one last time at the drifting Vraxis fleet. "They'll think twice before challenging us again," she said softly. "And if they don't, we'll be ready." Humanity had sent a message not just to the Vraxis but to the entire galaxy. Underestimating Earth would be fatal. And with that, the conflict came to an end, not in fire and fury, but in silence and certainty.